Jake had always lived a life on the move. As a cowboy, he had traveled across the vast American West, spending years working on different ranches and living a life that had become increasingly lonely. His boots had worn thin, his hat was faded, and his heart had begun to yearn for something more stable, something permanent. He had heard stories about a cabin for sale deep in the mountains of Arizona, far from the bustling towns and the noise of the world. The more he heard, the more intrigued he became. Maybe this could be the place where he could finally settle down. The journey to the cabin was not an easy one. Jake's horse, Dusty, plodded along the narrow, winding trail, surrounded by thick pine trees and steep cliffs. The air was dry and the sun beat down from a clear blue sky. Jake had been on the road for days and his muscles ached from the long ride. The promise of the cabin kept him going, though. The idea of having a place to call his own, away from everything, filled him with a sense of peace. As they reached the clearing, Jake finally saw the cabin in the distance. It was old but sturdy, with weathered wood and a small porch. It looked exactly like the kind of place he had been imagining, quiet, secluded, and full of potential. He could already picture himself sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains and feeling the weight of the world lift off his shoulders. But there was something strange about the scene. As Jake rode closer, he noticed a figure standing on the porch. It was a young woman, maybe in her late teens or early 20s. She was tall and slender, with long dark hair that flowed down her back. Her clothes were simple, made from natural materials, and she looked out at Jake with an expression that was hard to read, part curiosity, part wariness. Jake pulled Dusty to a stop and dismounted, wiping the sweat from his brow. He was surprised to see someone out here in the middle of nowhere. The woman didn't seem like someone who would be living in such an isolated place. She must have noticed his confusion because she spoke first. "You must be the one who bought the cabin," she said, her voice calm but firm. Jake nodded, a little unsure of how to respond. "Yeah, that's me. I'm Jake. I'm just here to take a look at the place before I move in." The woman didn't move, and there was a long pause before she spoke again. "I'm Ayanna," she said simply. "I'm the one who looks after this land." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Looks after it? What do you mean? I thought the cabin was for sale." Ayanna's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't seem angry. Instead, her gaze was thoughtful, almost as if she were trying to figure out Jake. "It's not that simple," she said after a moment. "The land here has a history, and it's not just any land. You should be careful about what you do with it." Jake was used to hearing talk about land having a history. He had heard similar stories before, from old-timers and ranchers who swore their lands were blessed or cursed. But this felt different. Ayanna's voice was steady, almost solemn. She didn't seem like the kind of person who would say such things lightly. "Look," Jake said, trying to sound friendly. "I'm not here to cause any trouble. I just want a place to settle down and live a peaceful life." Ayanna studied him for a long time, and for a moment, Jake felt as though she could see right through him. Then she sighed as if making a decision. "Fine," she said, her voice softer now. "But I'll warn you again. This land isn't like any other. The spirits of my ancestors are here. They watch over it." Jake felt a chill run down his spine, but he didn't let it show. He had lived his life in the real world, where hard work and sweat were what got things done. Superstitions and ghost stories didn't have a place in his mind. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that Ayanna's words meant something more than he understood. "I don't believe in spirits," Jake said, trying to ease the tension. "But if you think this land needs looking after, I'll respect that. I'm just here to live in peace." Ayanna nodded slowly, as if deciding he was being sincere. "Just remember," she said quietly, "I will be watching, and you'll need to understand what this land means. It's not something you can just own. It's a part of my people's history, and that's something you can't take lightly." Jake didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. "I understand," he said, even though he wasn't sure he did. With that, Ayanna turned and walked into the cabin, leaving Jake standing alone in the clearing. He watched her disappear inside, her figure vanishing into the shadows of the porch. For a moment he stood there, feeling the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. There was something about Ayanna, something mysterious, something powerful. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he felt it. He shrugged off the feeling, deciding it was just nerves. After all, he had come here to escape his past, to start over. Ayanna's words didn't mean anything. He was the one who had bought the cabin, the one who had the right to be here. Jake spent the rest of the day exploring the cabin. The inside was small but comfortable. There was a stone fireplace, a few pieces of old furniture, and a small kitchen area. It wasn't much, but it was perfect for him. He had always preferred simplicity over luxury. The walls were thick with the smell of wood, and the quietness of the place felt like a balm to his soul. As the sun began to set, Jake stepped outside onto the porch, leaning against the wooden railing. He looked out over the vast landscape, the mountains, the rolling hills, the endless sky. It was beautiful, peaceful, just what he had been looking for. But then, just as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, he heard a voice behind him. "I'm going to have to take this off," Ayanna said, her voice carrying on the wind. Jake turned, startled. Ayanna was standing on the porch, her dark eyes fixed on him. She wasn't wearing her simple dress anymore. Instead, she was dressed in a different outfit, a traditional dress made from fabric that looked like it had been woven by hand. It was a deep, earthy brown, decorated with intricate patterns that seemed to tell a story. Her hair was braided, and her expression was more serious than he had ever seen. Jake's confusion deepened. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice tense. Ayanna didn't answer right away. She just looked at him as though she were waiting for him to understand. But the longer Jake stood there, the more he realized he didn't understand at all. Jake stood frozen on the porch, the last of the sunlight casting long shadows across the land. The air was cool now, a gentle breeze rustling the trees as Ayanna stood still, her gaze locked on him. She hadn't answered his question, and for a moment, Jake wasn't sure if she had even heard him. The silence stretched between them, heavy and thick. Finally, Ayanna took a step closer, and Jake felt his heart beat a little faster. He was unsure of what to make of this situation. Her words were so strange, and the way she stood there, dressed in that traditional outfit, only made the moment more mysterious. He had never expected something like this. "I've lived here my whole life," Ayanna said softly, her voice carrying a weight that made Jake pause. "I've seen the land, the mountains, the winds change, and I've seen people come and go. But this cabin, this land, it's different. My ancestors are tied to it." Jake shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't one to believe in such things, but there was something in her eyes, something in the way she spoke that made him feel like he was hearing the truth. "You talk about spirits," Jake said, trying to make sense of her words. "But I don't believe in that sort of thing. I'm just here to live quietly." Ayanna gave him a long, steady look, and then with a small sigh, she took off her woven shawl and laid it on the railing of the porch. It was a quiet action, but it felt like a significant moment. "When I say I'm going to have to take this off," she said slowly, "it means I'm taking off my connection to the present, to the way things are now. I have to reconnect with the land, with my people's past, to understand what it truly means." Jake didn't know what to say. The words felt heavy, but he didn't fully understand them. What was she talking about? Taking off her connection to the present? It seemed like a strange thing to do, especially for someone so young. Ayanna, as if reading his thoughts, continued, "This land was once home to my people, but it's also been a place of loss. We were forced out, scattered, but we're still here in the air, in the soil, in the trees, and now it's my responsibility to protect it, to honor it." Jake frowned. "Protect it? From what?" Ayanna's gaze softened as she stepped closer, her feet making no sound on the wooden porch. "From people who don't understand it. People who think they can take it, own it, without knowing its story. You bought the cabin, but that doesn't mean you understand what this place is." Her words hit Jake harder than he expected. He thought he was just looking for a quiet place to live, somewhere far away from the noise of the world. He didn't realize that buying this cabin was more than just a simple transaction. It had deeper meaning, something far beyond the price he had paid for it. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Ayanna spoke again. "This place holds memories. It's where my people lived, laughed, and loved. It's where they fought too, where they struggled. And that history is still here, beneath the surface." Jake didn't know what to say to that. He had heard stories of Native American tribes, of their struggles with settlers, but he had never imagined that he would be standing in a place so tied to such history. His mind was racing, trying to process everything Ayanna was telling him. He had never thought much about the past, about the land, but now he began to feel its weight, the responsibility that came with living here. Ayanna looked at him with a kind of sadness in her eyes. "You'll learn more about this place, Jake. It won't be easy. The land will test you just as it tested my ancestors. Jake didn't know what she meant by that, but he didn't want to argue. Instead, he just nodded, trying to show that he understood even though he was far from sure of what she meant. The silence stretched on again, and for the first time, Jake felt truly alone on the porch. He had thought this cabin would be his escape, a place to find peace and forget the world. But now, it seemed like it was something much bigger, something that was connected to a past he couldn't fully comprehend. Ayanna stood quietly beside him, and for a moment Jake simply stared out over the land. The sun had set completely now, leaving only the darkened silhouette of the mountains in the distance. The air was crisp, and the wind whispered through the trees almost like a voice calling to him. It was as though the land itself was speaking, sharing its secrets, its stories. Jake had spent years on the move, never putting down roots, never connecting to anything or anyone. But here in this place with Ayanna beside him, he began to feel something stir deep inside him. He felt the pull of the land, of its history, of its people. For the first time, he wasn't just a cowboy looking for a home. He was a part of something much larger, something that had been there long before him. Ayanna spoke again, breaking the silence. You don't have to believe in spirits to understand this land, Jake. You don't have to believe in anything supernatural. But you do need to respect it. Respect the past. Respect the people who came before you. Jake turned to look at her, his mind still spinning with everything she had said. He hadn't expected any of this. He had expected to find a quiet place to live out his days. But now he realized that this was more than just a cabin in the mountains. It was a place of meaning, a place of memory, and it was calling him to listen. I'll try, he said quietly, unsure of what else to say. I'll try to understand. Ayanna smiled faintly, her eyes softening. That's all anyone can do, she said. Just try. She turned and began to walk away, heading down the porch and toward the edge of the clearing. Jake watched her go, his heart heavy with thoughts he couldn't yet put into words. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. His life in this cabin would not be simple. It would be a journey of understanding, of respect, and of learning. As he watched Ayanna disappear into the night, Jake realized that he wasn't just settling down in a cabin. He was stepping into a story that was much older than him, a story that would change him forever. And whether he was ready or not, he had become a part of it.